So this morning we're going to use as our foundation the gospel that we are empowered by from the prophet Isaiah. And Isaiah, the 12th chapter, the 2nd through the 5th verse, I've entitled my message, Celebrate the Glory, a Wellspring of Salvation. We'll go ahead and switch that one because that was... Uh-oh.
Technical glitch.
That is a technical glitch. That's last week. No, that's a good one. No, I think that's this week. Let's go ahead and read it and we'll see. Okay, we're on the... For those of you that are viewing this in Nevada and all around the world, even on days of celebration. So let's see if this is Isaiah. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. In that day you will say, give praise to the Lord. Proclaim his name. Make known among the nations what he has done. And proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. There we go. It is the wellspring of salvation. It's like a geyser. And so for many of us to journey that far to see Old Faithful, it kind of brings to my mind that talk that Isaiah had about the wellspring of salvation. And we talk about God's involvement with us. We talk about God's involvement with our own people, and we start to understand then that God is predictable as well as contagious in the joy that God brings to us. And to me, that's kind of the way that God intended for us to understand this wellspring whoosh that comes to us and brings this joy and happiness to us. And so I ask you in these times of celebration, the times of the message that talks about this geyser, this salvation wellspring, do you feel the joy in the celebration this morning? Kind of an exciting day in the house of the Lord, because you see, anniversaries and celebrations and things like that are milestones that we recognize in our hearts and in our lives. And the one question I have for you this morning is, how is it that you share the joy that you receive in the house of the Lord? How is it that you share with other people this joy that God puts in your heart? And Isaiah comes to us, it reminds me of a Pentecostal whooper. The verse that follows the ones that we have for this morning, listen to what Isaiah says. He sings, shout it aloud and sing for joy. I can just feel the excitement in his words. Let me see you smile that joy. It's just the way celebrations make us feel. And I see Isaiah standing up there in front of a crowd, shouting out to them, sing for joy in the feelings that the Lord gives to you. And I'm sure that in your hearts that God gives you that same feeling too. Because you see, in God's story of deep, satisfying relations between loved ones, His and ours, we awaken each morning, and how do you open your eyes in the morning? You open your eyes with this joy of salvation, this exciting wellspring, this geyser of God's love, or, well, maybe. Because, sometimes we don't always wake up to that same kind of feeling. Sometimes we wake up to different things in our lives, different situations in our lives, circumstances in our lives, circumstances in our bodies. Sometimes I just want to lay there for a minute and just let my body relax before I have to move it to the side and stand on these knees. But I think we still have to pose this question, even though it may sound a little bit like a downer. What is it that we can do when our well, which has always been faithful to us and has always given us pure, clean, cool, fresh water, what happens when our well pump is not deep enough to bring out the cool, clean water that we desire so much? What is it that we do? And you see, that was what was going on when Isaiah was talking to his people about the wellspring of salvation. Because there are two kinds of wells in our world, and they were struggling in those days with having adequate water supply, and for many of them, having a well or a cistern as their own, right there in their own property, was a pipe dream. The truth is that most of the towns had one community well, and it was never located centrally. It was always outside of city gates, and it was well guarded by the people, because who knows, their lifeline is connected to that water source, that well that they dug. And so we can relate to those kind of things, because many of us don't have generators in case of a storm or a crisis to pump up the water if we have a well. And even in our day, most of the people in our world are kind of urban or suburban people, and their wells are outside of the city gates too, right? They have the water and the power companies that provide the well to them. So it's very similar to what was going on in Israel when Isaiah was proclaiming this wellspring of salvation. And so they can relate to the people of Israel that if something happened to their source, they would become very, very thirsty. Now, there are two kinds of wells throughout time, but generally speaking, there's a kind of a dug well and a drilled well, right? In Israel, they would have a well that they dug. And the deeper you go, the better source of water you get. The cleaner, the purer, the cooler. Short wells, the water's not very good, but it's wet. Deep wells is much better. And today we have these rotary drilling machines that dig down probably sometimes 1,000 feet to get the pure water, pure cold water that's in the aquifers below us. And these drilled wells are not things that the Israelites would know anything about, because they are a product of our current civilization, our modern era. Because they would have to have dug their wells by hand. And can you imagine? The best wells are the ones that are small in circumference, and the deeper they go. And so how do you dig deep in a small area? And then to make sure that it doesn't cave in, they would put tiles and rocks to keep it from collapsing on them. And then on the top of it, to protect the purity of the water, then they'd have to cut some kind of cover, tile or concrete or stone. But dug wells are not without problems because they aren't that deep. They're vulnerable to the contamination. And there are times when they go dry. The water drops below the aquifers that they have reached, and the well bottom then becomes without fluid. But there are pluses and minuses, of course, in every situation, and especially theirs in the ancient world. Because just as having water at all was a huge thing, it would make them subject to enemy takeover, wouldn't it? So if an enemy wanted to take over a place in the ancient world, all they'd have to do is control their water supply. And that's why the water was one of the most valuable resources that the ancient world knew. Another plus, though, is that the well promoted this civic pride. It gave them a place to come and have conversation, and they would come to the well site and gather for fellowship. We even see that when Jesus met the woman at the well, right? And then even before that, in the 24th chapter of Genesis, it was that Abraham, Father Abraham, had this servant, and they're not sure exactly, but his name was something like Eliezer. And he was trying to find a bride and for Isaac, Abraham's son. And so where did he go to find this bride? He went to the well in the center of town there, and they met in fellowship, and he found Rebecca, right? And he said, I've got this guy that's the son of my master, and he says, I think you need to meet this guy. So the wells became this fellowship time, but it also became a time when they would gather together for long-term plans. Can't you imagine Isaac coming up to Rebecca and saying, please, can I just have a little sip of water from the water you just drew from the well? And from that first little encounter, then we know that the 12 tribes of Israel, with joy, he had drawn water from the wells of salvation. All of that stems from this gathering around the water source in their community. The depth of one well is really important. We talk about depth as a metaphor, of course, spiritual wellness and health of our soul. The wells spoken of Isaiah were not that deep. It was implied that it was joyous gratitude that he expressed. And you will say on that day, give thanks to the Lord. Call on his name, make known his deeds among the nations. Proclaim his name is exalted. Sing praise to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let us be known all over the earth. Shout aloud and sing for joy. The royal Zion, for great is in your midst. In the Holy One of Israel, what he was praising is not only the source of the survival of their people, but the source of the survival of their people, right? He's talking in a very preaching way about giving praise to the Lord in a way of excitement and exuberance and celebration. If you had wells that were going to give you clean and pure water, you'd probably be singing for joy too, especially back then. I remember when we were involved with getting our daughter Shelley's new house, and we had to dig this well over there in Bronson, and the guys bringing these big trucks, and they had a core drilling machine that was way high in the air, and they'd be digging and digging and digging, and I wondered, well, how do they know the water's there? And I was talking to the guy that was in charge, and he brought out these two pieces of metal, like a coat hanger, and he said, you just let them relax in your hand, and he's walking around, and they start moving like this, and I thought, well, he's doing that. And he's walking around, and all of a sudden it goes, boom. He says, the water's right here. I said, oh, come on. He says, no. See that stick up there? Those two pieces of wood? Go grab those. And he handed them to me. He says, hold them lightly in your hand. Yeah, right. And he says, now walk slowly towards the place where I am. And sure enough, we got to there, and those two sticks went. It was amazing to me that we could find water, and that's certainly a God thing, but it's a way that God created all the heavens and the earth. And when they found it, when they dug down there, this geyser came up. At first it was mud, right? And I thought, well, that's going to be nice to drink. And it comes out like orange, and it's shooting up in the air. And here's this poor guy with an old hat on with the brim all the way around, and a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and he's standing there, he's running the drill. He can't leave. And this mud is just coming up out of the ground and coming back down on top of him. And he's just happy as a clam, just doing his little thing. And eventually, as it kept going deeper and deeper, the wellspring of salvation became this clear, pure, cold water that gave him a shower. By the end of the process, he was clean and ready to go, and the water was cool and clear and clean. The Bible frequently registers similar concerns about the things of how deep wells are, and it makes me think of the times in the heat in the big cities generally, but some around here, I guess. They even have one in Gainesville. In the summertime, don't the parents take their kids to those parks that they have the water with the AstroTurf, and then every once in a while the water will shoot up here and over there, and the kids are running around and the water splashing down on them. And it reminds us of times when water is plentiful, and it reminds us of the times when we struggle and we have challenges, and certainly that applies to our lives and our spiritual lives too. And we see this when the Apostle Paul was complaining to the Corinthians. They should be ready for meat. Remember when Paul said to them, when I was there and I was teaching you in the beginning, and what I said to you was like milk. And because I told you, you're not ready for meat. And he says, it's been all these years now and you're still on milk. He says, what is it that's going on that you're not ready for solid food? Here's what he was referring to. He was saying to them that even now that you're not ready because there's this quarreling and jealousy amongst you. You're not acting like Christians, is what he was saying. You're still drinking the milk of a beginner, and you should be way downstream. You shouldn't be arguing amongst yourself. And in that 3rd chapter of Corinthians, he's saying, wake up, get moving. Learn what it's all about. Love the Lord your God. Understand the wellspring of salvation that God brings to you. So we take this metaphor of the milk and the meat, the shallow water, the deep water, and we start to understand the motivation for the Apostle Paul. This jealousy and this quarreling among the Christians are signs that are troubling of shallow spirituality. With the things that go on even today in our churches, and we see things going on all the time that kind of bring us down. We see people talking about other people and arguing, quarreling amongst each other. Same thing was happening. That's what Paul was saying to them. The wellspring of salvation needs to fill your heart. That you don't act like that. You don't treat others like that. That you learn to love and reach out to others like Jesus did. Because you see, those who have dug deep wells are those who are mature and have been trained, and they have the ability to distinguish between good and evil. Quarreling is certainly not good. So when our pump is deep enough, when we're less likely to be affected by the emotional and spiritual weather that swirls all around us, we draw that joy of the wellspring of salvation. It's that pure, clean love that comes to us. Certainly there are lots of metaphors that deal with waters, wells, pumps, milk, meat. So let's keep it simple. The Bible assures us, like those divining rods, that water is there, that God's love is there, that spirituality is there, that the life that Jesus led as a mentor to us is available and there for us. So, as we read today's promises, with joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. Here's what that verse really implies to us. It means to withdraw the water. And when you have a well, plus the water in the well, and it means to withdraw the water from the well, voila! Apply that to your spiritual life. You will have joy. And with the Lord and with this joy that comes from the well of salvation, that's a time to celebrate the glory. To celebrate the glory of the Lord. And all children say,
Amen.